I was the invisible force behind Julian Croft, the most celebrated architect in Miami, for 7 years. He took my designs, my ideas, and my dignity, until the day he publicly humiliated me one too many times. I quit, and he laughed, expecting me to crawl back. Instead, I left a single, sealed letter on his desk. That letter contained a truth so devastating it wouldn't just destroy his career. It would unravel the very foundation of his life and reveal a secret I'd been guarding since the day I walked into his glittering, corrupt world. I used to believe that buildings could breathe. My father told me that. He was a stonemason, his hands permanently etched with the dust of creation. He'd say, Lara, a great building has a soul. It's in the way the light finds the marble at dawn, in the whisper of wind through a hallway. You don't just design it, you listen to it. I was listening now. From my small, glass-walled cubicle on the 40th floor, I watched the Miami sun ignite the Atlantic in a blaze of orange and pink. The Croft & Associates Tower was a masterpiece of steel and ambition, a needle piercing the humid Florida sky. And from his corner office, the man who put it there, Julian Croft, was watching me. I was his head design architect. Officially, my title was Senior Creative Associate. A polite term for a ghost. For 7 years, I had been the silent hand behind his genius. The Sorensen Gallery. That was my sweeping curve. Inspired by a nautilus shell I'd found on South Beach. The Infinity Tower? My concept of layered, shifting balconies. Like a stack of shifting sea glass. And the world called him a visionary. This morning was the Zenith International Gala. The most prestigious award in global architecture. We were nominated for the Apex Hotel, a structure that seemed to float over Biscayne Bay. A structure I dreamed into existence during 3 months of sleepless nights, surviving on cold coffee and a fading sense of purpose. Julian's voice cut through the open plan, smooth as aged whiskey. Lara. A moment. I picked up my tablet, my portfolio of the night's presentation, and walked into the lion's den. His office was a museum to himself. Awards gleamed under custom lighting. Photos of him with mayors, celebrities, all flashing that same, brilliant, empty smile. He didn't look up from his monitor. The Apex presentation. I've made some refinements. My heart sank. A refinement usually meant he'd taken my coherent, elegant narrative and peppered it with buzzwords he barely understood. Julian, the deck is locked. The printers have the final boards. It's fine. He waved a dismissive hand. I just added a bit more meadow-it. The judges eat that up. The story of the inspiration, the late-night epiphany. He finally looked at me, his eyes a cool, calculating blue. You understand, it needs the personal touch. The personal touch. My late-night epiphany, born from watching my father struggle to lift a slab of granite, had become his. I remember the first time it happened. My first year. The Ocean View residence. I was so proud, so naive. I presented the initial sketches to him, my hands trembling. He'd studied them, nodded and said, "Good bones. Let me massage it." A week later, he presented it to the client as his own. I was hurt, but he'd taken me to lunch, told me I had a brilliant future, that this was how the industry worked. I paid. For 7 years. Lara? His voice brought me back. Is there a problem? The word stuck in my throat. Yes. Yes, there is a problem. My name is Lara Vance, and I am the soul of this building, and you are just the empty suit standing in its lobby. What I said was, no Julian, no problem. He smiled. Good. And wear the black dress tonight. The respectable one. The insult was so casual, so deftly inserted, it was like a paper cut. You don't feel the pain until you see the blood. I turned and walked back to my glass cage, the city sprawling beneath me. I felt a familiar hollowness. The ghost was getting tired of haunting a life that wasn't hers. And as I sat there, watching the sun fully claim the sky, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He's taking credit for the Apex structural solution too. The one you derived from your father's journal. I thought you should know. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. Who was this? And how did they know about my father's journal? The Zenith Gala was a symphony of artifice. The Biltmore Hotel ballroom was dripping with old money opulence, a stark contrast to Julian's sterile modernity. Chandeliers the size of small cars cast a diamond light on the most powerful people in real estate and design. And Julian was holding court, a king in his borrowed castle. I stood at the periphery, sipping champagne that tasted like ashes, wearing the respectable black dress that made me feel like a waitress. There you are. I turned. Ben Carter, the firm's managing partner and Julian's longtime enabler, smiled at me. Ben was the oil in the machine, the one who smoothed over the cracks Julian's ego left in its wake. He was also the only one who ever acknowledged my work, in quiet, backhanded compliments. You look pale, Alara. Nerves? He asked, his voice a low murmur. Just taking it all in, Ben. It's quite a night for Julian. For all of us. He leaned in closer, the scent of his expensive cologne enveloping me. You know, without you, none of this would be possible. He knows it, too. Deep down. I gave a non-committal smile. Is it? Ben's eyes held mine for a beat too long. Sometimes, I think you're the entire team, and the rest of us are just the cheerleading squad. Before I could respond, the lights dimmed. The presentation was beginning. Julian took the stage, the spotlight making him look like a messiah. The crowd fell silent. And he began to speak. He spoke about the challenges of integrating the apex into the marine ecosystem. About the philosophy of fluid dynamics. He used my words. Verbatim. He talked about the weight of history meeting the lightness of innovation. A direct quote from the essay I'd written in my master's program. My fist clenched around my champagne flute. I saw my designs, my life's blood, projected 50 feet high, with his name plastered beneath them. And then he got to the structural solution. The one the anonymous text had mentioned. The one I had arrived from my father's journal, a series of load-bearing calculations based on ancient dry stone wall techniques. And this, Julian said, pointing to the complex, beautiful web of supports on the screen, was my eureka moment. I was watching a documentary on Roman aqueducts, and it struck me. The strength isn't in the material, but in the balance, the transfer of force. It's about creating a conversation between the earth and the sky. A lie. A smooth, polished, utterly convincing lie. The audience erupted in applause. I felt dizzy. This wasn't just theft. This was a violation. He was plundering my past, my heritage, and presenting it as his own tourist souvenir. I must have made a sound, a choked gasp. Because Ben placed a steadying hand on my arm. Easy, Alara. It's just a story. It's what sells. I pulled my arm away. It's not a story, it's my father's life. The award was announced. Julian Croft, for the Apex Hotel. He ascended the stage, took the heavy crystal obelisk, and held it aloft. His gaze swept the crowd and for a fleeting second, it landed on me. In that moment, the hollowness inside me filled with something new. Something hot and sharp and dangerous. It was the end of something. I just didn't know it yet. The after-party was worse. Julian, flush with victory, was holding court by the grand piano, the Zenith Award placed prominently on the table beside him like a holy relic. I walked up to him, my heart hammering against my ribs. Julian. A word? He glanced at me, annoyed at the interruption. Can it wait, Alara? I'm in the middle of something. No, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. It can't. The structural solution for the apex, you credited the Romans. It was based on my father's work. You know it was. The people around us fell silent, sensing blood in the water. Julian's smile was a masterpiece of condescension. He laughed. A light, easy, dismissive laugh that cut deeper than any shout. Alara, always so passionate. So detailed. He put a hand on my shoulder, a patronizing gesture for the benefit of our audience. The big ideas, the connections. That's the magic. The details are for the draftsman. Don't get lost in them. He turned back to his group, effectively dismissing me. Where was I? Ah, yes, the aqueducts. I stood there, frozen. The respectable dress felt like a shroud. I was a ghost. I had always been a ghost. But in that moment, I decided I would become a different kind of ghost. The kind that haunts you. The kind that burns your house down. I didn't say another word. I turned, walked out of the ballroom, through the opulent lobby, and into the thick Miami night. I didn't go home. I went to the one place that still made sense. My father's old workshop, now my studio, filled with the dust of real creation. And I opened his old journal. As my fingers traced his handwritten notes, a plan began to form. It was vague, born of pure rage. But it was there. And my phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. He's going to fire you, Ilara. He told Ben you've become emotionally invested and a liability. He's drafting the termination papers Monday morning. Monday morning. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue, mocking the storm inside me. The office felt different. The hum of the air conditioner was the low growl of a beast. The glass walls of my cubicle felt less like a cage and more like an observation deck. I was studying my prey. I saw Ben walk into Julian's office and close the door. The termination papers. The anonymous texter had been right. A part of me, the old, bruised part, wanted to cry. The new part, the part forged in the fire of public humiliation, simply waited. An hour later, Julian's door opened. He stood there, his expression a mask of somber disappointment. Ilara, my office. Please. This was it. He was going to fire me. To discard me after 7 years of loyalty and brilliance. He was going to make me a victim. But I wasn't going to let him. I stood up, my back straight. I didn't take my tablet. I didn't take my coffee. I walked in, calm, and sat in the chair opposite his desk. Ilara. He began, steepling his fingers. This is difficult. Your work has been adequate for many years. But lately, I've sensed a shift in you. A resentment. An inability to be a team player. I said nothing. I just looked at him. He seemed unnerved by my silence. After your outburst at the gala, I've been left with no choice. The board and I feel it's time for a change in leadership on the creative team. We're offering you a very generous severance package, contingent, of course, on a full non-disclosure agreement. He slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. The termination letter. I looked down at it. Then I looked back at him. And I smiled. It was a small, quiet smile, but it made his eyes narrow. Is something funny, Ilara? No, Julian, I said. My voice eerily calm. Nothing's funny, I quit. His eyebrows shot up. Then, he laughed. That same dismissive laugh from the gala. It echoed around his trophy-filled office. You, quit? Ilara, be serious. What are you going to do? Go work for a rival? You have no name. No profile. You're nothing in this industry without Croft and Associates on your resume. I'm not going to a rival, I said, standing up. I'm just going. I reached into my bag and pulled out a simple, cream-colored envelope, thick with its contents. I placed it on his desk, right on top of the termination letter. What's this? He asked, his laughter dying, replaced by suspicion. Consider it my resignation letter, I said. My final memo. Don't bother reading it now, it's technical. You might get lost in the details. I turned and walked toward the door. Ilara. His voice was sharp, commanding. If you walk out that door, don't you ever think about coming back. This ends now. You will be blacklisted. You hear me? You're finished. I stopped at the door, my hand on the cool metal of the handle. No, Julian, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but I knew he heard it. You are. And I walked out. I didn't look back at my cubicle. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I walked past the stunned faces of my colleagues, through the open plan office, and into the elevator. The doors slid shut, enclosing me in a silent, descending box. Back in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine with a hand that was finally starting to shake. The adrenaline was fading. Had I just thrown my entire career away? Was the letter too much? Too soon. My phone rang. It was Ben. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text came through from him. Elara, what did you do? Julian just read the first page of that letter and he's screaming. He just threw the Zenith Award through his office window. I smiled, a real, genuine smile this time. I picked up my phone and texted the unknown number. Phase 1 is complete. He's taken the bait. The response was immediate. Good. He has no idea the well is poisoned. Let him drink. The first day of freedom felt like a hangover. I woke up late, the silence of my apartment a physical presence. No emails. No calls from Julian. No urgent deadlines. It was disorienting. I made coffee and sat by my window, watching the rain blur the Miami skyline. The Croft & Associates Tower was just a gray smudge in the distance. A monument to a life I no longer had to live. What do you do when the identity you've clung to for 7 years suddenly evaporates? You look for the foundations. And my foundations were here, in this small apartment, and in my father's workshop. They were in the smell of old paper and graphite, not in the sterile lemon-scented air of a corporate tower. My phone buzzed incessantly. News of my dramatic exit had spread through the Miami architecture scene like wildfire. There were texts from colleagues, some concerned, most just morbidly curious. Is it true you told Julian to go to hell? Heard you quit. You're a legend. What was in the letter? Julian is apparently on a warpath. I ignored them all. The only person I responded to was my anonymous ally. Their name was Matteo, as I'd learned in a late-night, encrypted chat. He was a former IT contractor for the firm, a brilliant, quiet man whom Julian had similarly cheated and discarded years ago. He'd been watching, waiting for his moment. I was his weapon. And he was mine. He'd been the one to help me gather the evidence. The hidden server logs, the deleted emails, the financial trails Julian thought were buried forever. 3 days after I quit, the first stone dropped. A blog called Architectural Truth, a notorious muckraking publication, ran a story. The headline was, Echoes of Plagiarism? A closer look at Julian Croft's early work. It didn't mention me by name. It was subtle. It compared Julian's senior thesis from Yale, a clunky, derivative piece, to the stunning, revolutionary work he produced just a year after graduation. The work that had made his name. The work that was, in fact, stolen from a forgotten, unbuilt portfolio by a reclusive designer named Alistair Finch. Matteo had found the connection. The article asked a simple, devastating question. How did Julian Croft's design sensibility undergo such a radical, overnight transformation? The architecture world murmured. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was New York. A major architecture magazine. I let it go to voicemail. This was the beginning. The letter I left for Julian wasn't just a resignation. It was a table of contents. A map of his own destruction. Page 1 had simply listed the first piece of evidence, with a footnote. Source: Finch Portfolio, 2004, held in the Yale archives. Access log. J. Croft, the 12th of October 2004. He'd read that first page and known, instantly, that this wasn't a tantrum. That night I dreamt of my father. He was in his workshop, his back to me, running his hand over a block of raw marble. It's all in the grain, Ellie, he said, without turning around. You can't fight the grain. You have to understand it. You have to follow it. The weakness, and the strength, are in the same place. I woke up with a start, tears on my cheeks. He was right. Julian's weakness was his ego, his need to be seen as a god. I wasn't attacking his business. I was attacking his myth. And I was using the very grain of his being his pride to splinter him apart. A week passed. The murmurs were growing louder. Then, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole. It was Ben Carter. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His usual polished demeanor was gone, replaced by a raw, frantic energy. "Hey Lara," he said, his voice muffled through the door. He's not just angry, Alara. He's scared. And when Julian gets scared, he becomes dangerous. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door. This was unexpected. Ben was the fixer. If he was here, the damage was worse than I'd imagined. "What do you want, Ben?" I asked, my voice flat. "I want to make a deal," he pleaded. "Before you publish page 2. Before you destroy us all." He knew. He knew the letter was a serialized destruction. And he knew I held all the remaining chapters. I opened the door. Ben Carter didn't wait for an invitation. He brushed past me, his eyes scanning my small apartment like a corporate spy in unfamiliar territory. He looked utterly out of place among my father's rustic wooden sculptures and my own framed personal sketches. "You shouldn't be here, Ben." "We're past shouldn't, Alara," he said, his voice ragged. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it. "A tell. Ben was never messy. Do you have any idea what you've started?" I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe, a barrier between him and my sanctuary. "I have a pretty good idea. I wrote the script." "This isn't a game," he snapped, then immediately checked himself, lowering his voice. "That blog post. The Finch portfolio. It's a nuisance. But Julian is already spinning it. He's calling it a youthful homage. He'll weather it. But the rest of the letter. What's on page 2, Elara?" I said nothing. I just watched him. I was learning that silence was a weapon more powerful than any accusation. Ben's shoulders slumped. The performance of frantic anger faded, replaced by something that looked like genuine fear. "It's about the money, isn't it? The Seraphim Group." The name landed in the quiet room like a lead weight. I kept my face a careful mask, but internally, I was reeling. Seraphim Group. Mateo had found traces of their transactions, shell companies funneling money to cover Julian's wild overruns on the Apex project. But it was a ghost. We had whispers, not proof. "I don't know what you're talking about." I lied smoothly. "Don't you?" He let out a hollow laugh. "You're a terrible liar. It's your only flaw." He paced to my window, staring out at the glittering, corrupt city. "Julian isn't just an egomaniac, Ilara. He's a gambler. The Apex went 40% over budget. The Infinity Tower had that foundation settlement, the one we hushed up. That cost millions to fix quietly. He's leveraged to the hilt. The banks won't touch him anymore." He turned to face me, his expression grim. "So he went to the Seraphim Group. They're private. The kind of private that doesn't take no for an answer. The kind that expects a return on their investment, no matter the cost." "And what was the cost, Ben?" I asked, a cold dread seeping into my bones. "What did Julian promise them?" He looked down, suddenly unable to meet my gaze. "Things. Favors. Design approvals on properties they own. He's been cutting corners. Signing off on things he shouldn't. Putting his name on projects that are little more than glass-coated death traps, just to keep the Seraphim money flowing." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My father's voice echoed in my mind. "A great building has a soul." Julian was building soulless, dangerous husks. "He's corrupt," I breathed, the word tasting like ash. "It's not just about credit, it's criminal. It's business." Ben insisted, a desperate plea in his eyes. "And if you expose this, if you drag the Seraphim Group into the light, they won't sue you, Elara. They won't try to blacklist you. They will break you. And they'll break me, and everyone else at the firm, to get to Julian. We're all tied to this." I stared at him, this man who had always been the calm, reasonable one. The good cop to Julian's bad cop. And you let him, I said, my voice trembling with a fresh wave of betrayal. You knew. You knew he was stealing my work. You knew he was taking mob money, and you stood there and you oiled the gears. You're not his partner, Ben, you're his accomplice. For a fleeting second, a shadow crossed his face. It was more than guilt. It was shame. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by the polished facade of the dealmaker. I'm a survivor, he said coldly. And I'm here to offer you a chance to survive too. A one-time offer. $2 million. Cash. Non-disclosure. You walk away, you never speak of this again, and you give me the rest of the letter. All copies. $2 million. It was more money than I'd ever seen. It was silence money. Blood money. I walked to my front door and opened it. Get out. Laura. Be reasonable. Get out, I repeated. My voice like steel. Tell Julian his money can't fix this. Tell him the ghost is done negotiating. Ben stared at me, his expression shifting from desperation to a cold, resigned fury. He straightened his tie, the mask of the executive sliding perfectly back into place. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You think you're fighting a man. You're not. You're poking a beast with very, very sharp teeth. Don't say I didn't warn you. He walked out. I shut the door behind him, my heart hammering. I leaned against it, sliding to the floor. My phone buzzed. Mateo. I was monitoring your building's external cameras. Ben Carter. He's a bigger player than we thought. I just dug deeper. The initial wire from Seraphim? It didn't go to the firm's account. It went to a shell company registered to a B. Carter. I stared at the screen, the words blurring. Ben wasn't just an accomplice. He was a co-conspirator. He was in as deep as Julian, maybe deeper. And his panicked visit wasn't a warning. It was a scouting mission. The floor of my studio was a mosaic of printed emails, financial records, and my father's old journals. The air smelled of strong coffee and ozone. Ben's visit hadn't scared me. It had armed me. He'd handed me the key to the Seraphim group, and in his panic, he'd confirmed we were on the right trail. Mateo's voice was calm in my ear, a digital specter guiding my hands. He's been skimming a percentage off the top of every Seraphim infusion before it hits the firm's accounts. He's not just enabling Julian's addiction, he's profiting from it. I looked at a grainy, scanned photo on my screen. Alistair Finch, a man with sad eyes and a gentle smile, standing in front of a model of a building that was unmistakably the early work that made Julian famous. So Julian steals the soul, I whispered, my finger tracing Finch's face on the screen. And Ben sells it for parts. Precisely, Mateo said. They're a perfect, parasitic ecosystem. But ecosystems are fragile. You remove one element, and the whole thing collapses. It was time to stop being a ghost. It was time to become a virus. We decided on a two-pronged attack. Mateo would work on decrypting the full financial trail from Midas Holdings, a digital paper trail that would lead right back to Ben's personal accounts. My job was the court of public opinion. I spent the next 48 hours in a focused frenzy. I created a simple, anonymous blog on the dark web. The first post went live at 3 a.m. on a Thursday. It wasn't an accusation. It was a lesson. The title was On Integrity. The Finch Fracture. Using side-by-side comparisons, I laid out Alistair Finch's original portfolio sketches next to Julian's early masterpieces. I didn't need to shout. The evidence screamed for itself. I included dates, access logs Mateo had pulled from the Yale server, and a quiet, heartbreaking biography of Finch's dreams, his quiet retirement from the field, his death from a sudden illness years later, his genius unrecognized. Then, I linked it to Julian's current work. I showed how the core philosophy of Finch's organic, empathetic design was a thread that ran through every project I had ever designed for Julian. I showed how Julian had never evolved, because he had never truly created. I didn't post it to mainstream architecture forums. I seeded it in the quiet, academic corners of the internet. The places where true believers lived. The purists. The effect was slower than a bomb, but more insidious. Like a poison seeping into a water table. By the next morning, my personal, public-facing social media dormant for years had a handful of new followers. Professors. Historians. The kind of people whose respect Julian craved but could never buy. My phone lit up with a notification. An article in a niche but highly respected journal. Re-evaluating the Croft canon, the ghost in the architectural machine. They'd found my blog. They'd done their own digging. And they'd confirmed it. It was a small victory. A tremor, not an earthquake. But in the world of reputation, tremors have a way of traveling. Matteo called, his voice buzzing with excitement. I'm in. The Midas Holdings ledger. It's all here. He's diverted over $4 million. But there's more. There are payments from Midas to another company. My blood ran cold. Palladium. The company that had won the bid under suspicious circumstances, despite a higher quote than its competitors. The company that had been responsible for the cost-saving measures I'd fought against. Ben's not just skimming, I realized, the horror dawning. He's getting kickbacks. He's paying Palladium to cut corners, and they're paying him back under the table. We were no longer just fighting for credit. We were uncovering a network of fraud that put real, living people in danger every single day. Just then, my apartment intercom buzzed, sharp and invasive. I jumped. I walked over to the panel, my heart in my throat. Yes? A professional, neutral voice replied. Elara Vance? Package for you. Requires a signature. I hadn't ordered anything. I looked at the video feed. A man in a courier's uniform stood there, holding a slim, legal-sized cardboard envelope. Who's it from? I asked. My voice tight. The return address says Cromwell and Shaw, attorneys at law. My blood went from cold to ice. Cromwell and Shaw. I knew that name. They were the most ruthless litigation firm in Miami. Julian's first line of attack. The man on the screen looked up, directly into the camera. And for a split second, his neutral expression shifted. It wasn't a smile. It was a smirk. It's regarding a Mr. Julian Croft, he said, his tone now laced with a subtle threat. He insisted it was urgent. The documents were a masterpiece of intimidation. A lawsuit for $50 million. Defamation. Tortious interference with business relations. Theft of intellectual property. The words swam on the page, legal piranhas meant to devour me whole. But it was the attached motion for a preliminary injunction that stole the air from my lungs. They were demanding a court order forcing me to immediately cease all defamatory activities. And to formally retract every statement I'd ever made. They wanted to gag me. To bind me and throw me in a digital dungeon. My hands trembled. $50 million. It was a number designed to crush my spirit before the fight even began. This was Ben's work. This was the sharp teeth he'd warned me about. He can't do this. I whispered to Matteo over the phone, the legal papers spread out before me like a declaration of war. Everything I've said is true. The law isn't always about truth, Matteo replied, his voice grim. It's about who has the resources to outlast the other. This is a bludgeon. They're trying to bankrupt you in legal fees before you can even step into a courtroom. I felt the walls closing in. The quiet confidence I'd felt just hours ago was evaporating, replaced by a cold, sharp fear. I was one person. They were a fortress of money and influence. And then, my email pinged. A new message. The sender was a .well.wisher@gmail.com. The subject line was a flaw in the armor. My breath hitched. I clicked it open. There was no body text. Just a single, grainy, black and white photograph attached. It was a picture of a picture, seemingly taken from an old yearbook. One was unmistakably Julian Croft, his blonde hair perfectly styled even then. The other was Ben Carter. They stood in front of a familiar, sweeping architectural model. But that wasn't the flaw. Scrawled in ink at the bottom of the original photo was a caption. Me and Benny, celebrating our collaboration. The Finch fling is a go, JC. The Finch fling. A firestorm of understanding erupted in my mind. Ben wasn't just a later accomplice. He was there from the very beginning. He wasn't the oil in the machine, he was the co-architect of the entire fraud. The Finch fling. They'd given their crime a cute, frat boy nickname. The anonymous email. The well-wisher. It had to be someone from their inner circle from back then. Someone who had kept this souvenir, this piece of damning evidence, for decades. Ben's entire performance in my apartment, the fear, the warnings, the offer was a lie. He wasn't trying to save the firm from the Seraphim fallout. He was trying to save himself. He was terrified that my letter, my investigation, would lead me not just to Julian's theft, but to his own original sin. He had looked me in the eye and called Julian a gambler, a corrupt man, all while knowing he was his original partner in crime. He had presented himself as a voice of reason, when he was the architect of the reason. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, it felt like the world tilting on its axis. The two men I had dedicated my professional life to were not just flawed. They were a single, two-headed monster. I grabbed my phone, my fingers flying across the screen as I texted Matteo. Forget the money. Go deeper. I need everything you can find on Ben Carter and Julian Croft at Yale. Their senior year. Their thesis projects. Everything. Matteo's response was immediate. Shifting focus. But Alara, the lawsuit. We have to respond, we need a lawyer. I looked at the yearbook photo on my screen, at Ben's young, grinning face. A cold, clear certainty settled over me, washing away the fear. No, I said aloud, my voice steady as stone. I typed my reply. We don't need a lawyer, we need a bigger stage. It was time to stop whispering in the dark. My father's journal was open on my desk, next to the lawsuit and the damning yearbook photo. I wasn't looking for design inspiration anymore. I was looking for strategy. For philosophy. He'd written. True strength is not in resisting pressure, but in redirecting it. A river does not fight the rock. It simply flows around it, and in time, the rock is worn away. This is the way of water. This is the way of stone. Julian and Ben were the rock. A hard, immovable obstacle. I had been trying to resist them, to fight them head-on with facts and accusations. But their legal team was a fortress wall. I would break myself against it. I needed to become the river. I needed to redirect their own pressure back onto them. A two-pronged attack was too simplistic. I said to Matteo, my voice calm, focused. I had pinned the yearbook photo to my wall. We need a multi-layered strategy. We attack the myth, the money, and the man, all at once. We use their own weight to sink them. I started sketching on a large sheet of paper. Not a building. A blueprint. A blueprint for karma. Layer 1. The myth. We would continue the quiet academic assault, but amplify it. Matteo would ghostwrite a series of detailed, unassailably researched articles under the pseudonym The Curator, linking not just Finch's work, but the work of 3 other lesser-known designers to Julian's subsequent breakthroughs. Layer 2. The money. This was the most dangerous layer. We wouldn't publish the Seraphim information ourselves. That was the poisoned well Ben had warned me about. Instead, we would create an untraceable, encrypted packet, the Midas Holdings ledger, the Palladium kickbacks, the Seraphim wire transfers, and leak it to a specific, dogged financial journalist at the Miami Herald who had a known hatred for corporate corruption. We would let the mainstream media become our bomb. Layer 3. The man. This was the most personal, the most cruel, and the most necessary. Julian's entire identity was his genius. We would systematically dismantle it, not with our words, but with his own. The Apex Hotel has its grand opening in 3 weeks, I said. A plan crystallizing with terrifying clarity. It's his crowning achievement. The jewel in his stolen crown. What are you thinking? Matteo asked, a note of caution in his voice. I'm thinking it's time for a public unveiling, I replied, my eyes fixed on my father's words. Redirect the pressure. I opened a new digital folder. I began to compile every single original sketch, every email I'd sent to Julian with my concepts, every dated CAD file for the Apex Hotel. I had a digital paper trail a mile long, proving the entire creative genesis was mine. We don't release this yet, I explained. We wait. We let the first 2 layers do their work. Let the murmurs about plagiarism grow louder. Let the financial scandal begin to bubble. Let Julian get nervous, desperate. Let him pour everything he has into the Apex opening, believing it will be his redemption. I could see it all unfolding in my mind, as clear as a finished design. And then, on the night of the gala, as he stands in front of the cameras, ready to accept praise for my masterpiece. I paused, the rightness of it settling in my soul. That's when we release it all. Not as an attack. As a tribute. A website called The Soul of the Apex. A full, public archive of its true creation. Matteo was silent for a long moment. That's brutal. It will humiliate him on a global stage. No, I corrected him, my voice soft but absolute. He humiliates himself every time he claims a soul that isn't his. I'm just finally turning on the lights so everyone can see. The plan was set. The karma blueprint was complete. Just as I was finalizing the details, my phone lit up with a call. Not from a blocked number. It was from Sarah, the head of PR at Croft & Associates. A friendly face, or so I'd once thought. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, her message played, her voice sweet, conciliatory, and utterly false. "Hey Lara, hi, listen, I know things got heated. But Julian asked me to call. He's willing to drop the lawsuit. All of it. No retraction needed. He just wants to talk. Man to man. He says there's a new project, something huge, and he needs your vision. He says he's ready to admit he was wrong. To give you the credit you deserve. Can we please just talk?" I stared at the phone, a cold smile touching my lips. The river had begun to flow, and the rock was already starting to crumble. The offer wasn't a peace treaty, it was a surrender. And it was too late. I deleted the message. Sarah's call was the first thread. An email from Julian's personal attorney, the tone shifting from threatening to open to a mutually beneficial resolution. A text from a former colleague, saying the office atmosphere was tense and Julian was unusually quiet. They were probing. Testing my walls for weakness. The most surprising contact came on the second evening. My personal cell phone rang. The name on the screen made my breath catch. Evelyn Croft. Julian's wife. I had only met her a handful of times at company functions. She was a quiet, elegant woman with the sad, knowing eyes of someone who had long ago accepted a supporting role in the grand drama of her husband's life. We'd never spoken beyond polite pleasantries. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Evelyn. Ilara." Her voice was hushed, as if she were calling from a closet. "Thank you for answering. I know I have no right to call you. Why are you calling, Evelyn?" I asked, my guard firmly up. She took a shaky breath. "He's not well, this is destroying him. The blog posts, the whispers at the club, he didn't sleep last night. He just paced. He's like a caged animal." She paused, and I could almost hear her choosing her words with immense care. "The lawsuit. It's just his pride talking. He'll drop it, I'll make him drop it. Just, please. Can you stop this? Before it goes any further." It was a masterful performance. The concerned wife, appealing to my humanity. It was so much more effective than Ben's threats or Sarah's fake sweetness. For a moment, I felt a pang of something not for Julian, but for her. "Evelyn," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "He brought this on himself. You know that, don't you? You have to know what he is." The silence on the other end was heavy, profound. When she spoke again, her voice was a broken whisper. "I know he's a flawed man. But he's my husband. And this, Whatever you're planning, it feels different, it feels final. She was right. It was final. I'm sorry, I said, and I truly meant it. But the time for stopping was before he laughed in my face. Before he stole from a dead man. It's too late. I heard a soft sob, then the line went dead. I put the phone down, my hand trembling. That had been the hardest call. The most human. It would have been so easy to fold, to be the bigger person, to accept a quiet settlement and walk away. But then I looked at the yearbook photo. The Finch fling. I thought of Alistair Finch's gentle, forgotten eyes. I thought of my father's hands, worn from honest work. This wasn't just about me anymore. My computer chimed. Mateo. The encrypted packet for the Miami Herald journalist was ready. The first 2 articles from the curator were scheduled to auto-post at midnight. The river was flowing. There was no damming it now. I took a deep, steadying breath, centering myself on the blueprint. On the plan. And then my landline rang. The one attached to my studio, a number only a handful of people had. I picked it up. Hello? There was no greeting. Just the sound of ragged, angry breathing. Then, a voice I knew intimately, stripped of all its polished charm, raw and venomous. You think you're clever, you little bitch. It was Julian. You think your little blog posts matter? You're a gnat. A speck. I built an empire. I will grind you into dust. I said nothing. I just listened, letting his rage fill the silence. I know about your father's workshop, he hissed, the threat now naked and personal. Such a shame if something were to happen to it. All that, fragile history. The line went dead. The rock wasn't crumbling. It was fighting back. And it was aiming for my foundation. The threat to my father's workshop didn't paralyze me. It crystallized my resolve. Julian had crossed a line from professional warfare into something darker, more personal. He had shown me the bottom of his soul, and it was a black pit. I called Mateo, my voice cold. He just threatened to burn down my father's workshop. Mateo let out a low whistle. He's panicking. That's a desperate man's move. It's a declaration of war, I corrected. We need to accelerate the timeline. And we need physical security. I'm not letting him touch my father's legacy. I spent the next few hours installing motion sensor cameras around the perimeter of the small, standalone building that housed the workshop. I moved the most precious of my father's journals and my own original Apex sketches to a safety deposit box. As I was testing the final camera, my phone buzzed. A Facebook message. From Evelyn Croft. The message contained a single, shocking image. It was a screenshot of a text message thread. Julian. I don't care what it costs. I want that workshop gone. A gas leak. An electrical fire. Make it look like an accident. Unknown number. It'll be done. $50K. Half now. Julian. You'll have it. Do it before the Apex opening. I want her broken before then. Below the image, Evelyn had written just 3 words. I am sorry. My legs felt weak. I sat down on an old wooden crate, staring at the screen. This wasn't a vague threat. This was a plotted murder of my past. And Evelyn, his wife, had just handed me the evidence. Why? Was it guilt? Was it her own long-simmering revenge against a husband who had undoubtedly betrayed her in 1,000 ways? I didn't know. I didn't care. In that moment, she wasn't the enemy. She was the most unexpected of allies. I forwarded the screenshot directly to Mateo. We have him. This is conspiracy to commit arson. Maybe worse. This is beyond the financial stuff, Elara. Mateo said, his voice uncharacteristically shaken. This is criminal. We have to go to the police. No, I said, the karma blueprint evolving in my mind. Not yet. The police would warn him. He'd lawyer up and we'd be stuck in the system. This is bigger than the police now. Then what? We can't just sit on this. We don't sit on it, I said, a new, final layer of the plan locking into place. We add it to the grand unveiling. We show the world that Julian Croft isn't just a thief and a fraud. He's willing to destroy a dead man's legacy to protect his lie. We show them the man behind the mask. The following morning, the first part of our plan hit the mainstream. The Miami Herald published a front-page story. Shadow funds and shady deals. The financial house of cards behind Miami's star architect. It named names. Seraphim Group. Midas Holdings. Palladium Construction. It detailed the kickbacks, the diverted funds, the safety compromises. It stopped just short of outright accusing Ben of embezzlement, but the trail was laid out with devastating clarity. The effect was seismic. News vans surrounded the Croft and Associates tower. The firm's website crashed under the traffic. I sat in my studio, watching the chaos unfold on a live local news feed. The reporter stood in front of the gleaming tower, her voice sharp with scandal. I received a single, one-word text from the unknown number that was Evelyn. Soon. The rock was not just crumbling. It was beginning to slide, gathering momentum, heading for a cliff. My email alert chimed. It was a notification from a web hosting service. The site I had secretly built, the soul of the Apex, was live and ready. All it needed was one click from me to make it publicly accessible. The Apex Hotel grand opening was in 48 hours. I opened the email from Sarah in PR, sent just minutes ago, subject line. Urgent. Apex Gala invitation. Ilara, in light of recent events, Julian feels your presence at the gala is essential. A show of unity. A chance to publicly put this all behind us. He is prepared to make a statement about your invaluable contributions. Please. Come as our guest of honor. I smiled. The river had reached the rock. The invitation wasn't an offer, it was a surrender. They thought they could still control the narrative, could still buy my silence with a moment in the spotlight. They had no idea I wasn't coming as a guest. I was coming as the wrecking ball. The city was holding its breath. You could feel it in the humid air, in the tense silence that had replaced the usual Miami buzz. The Herald story was all anyone was talking about. Croft and Associates was a fortress under siege. Its gleaming glass facade now feeling more like a target. I spent the day before the gala in a state of surreal calm. I went for a long run along the beach, the salt spray stinging my skin. I visited my father's grave, placing a small, smooth stone from his workshop on the headstone. I didn't speak. I just listened to the wind in the palms, hoping for a sign, for a whisper of approval. None came. Just silence. I was on my own. That evening I laid out the dress I would wear. It wasn't the respectable black one Julian had once commanded. It was a deep, blood-red gown I'd bought for myself years ago and never had the courage to wear. It was a statement. It was a warning. My phone rang. It was Ben. This time, I answered. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to hear the sound of the foundation cracking. Ilara. His voice was a dry rasp. There was no pretense of friendship or reason left. Call off the website. Call off whatever you have planned for tomorrow. Or what, Ben? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. You'll sue me? You'll have your mob friends burn down my life? I have the text messages, Ben. I have the Finch fling photo. I have the Midas ledger. Your hands are just as dirty as his. Dirtier, in some ways. You were the architect of this, weren't you? You found Alistair Finch. You showed Julian how to steal. The silence on the other end was a confession. You're finished, I said, the truth of it as solid as marble. Both of you. You ruin him, you ruin me, he snarled, the polished facade finally, completely gone. And I will not be ruined by a nobody like you. I will take you down with me, Ilara. I swear it. You can try, I whispered. But you're a forger, Ben. And I'm the real thing. And tomorrow, everyone is going to see the difference. I ended the call and blocked his number. There was nothing left to say. Later that night, as I was running through the final checks on the website, a new email arrived from Evelyn. It contained no message. Just a single audio file. I downloaded it, my heart pounding. I plugged in my headphones and pressed play. It was a recording. The quality was crisp, clearly made on a modern phone. I could hear the clink of ice in a glass, the sound of Julian pacing. Julian's voice. Can't believe that little bitch has done this. The Herald. How did she get the Midas files? It had to be Ben. That sniveling, greedy, I should have cut him loose years ago. Evelyn's voice. What did you expect, Julian? You've been stealing from her for years. From everyone. Julian. It's not stealing, it's curation. She had the raw material, but I gave it form. I gave it a name. Without me, her designs would be nothing. Scribbles in a margin. I made her. Evelyn. You broke her. And now she's breaking you. It's almost biblical. Julian. Shut up. I am Julian Croft. I am not going to be destroyed by some vengeful secretary with a drafting degree. That workshop, it's the heart of her. When it's gone, she'll break. She'll come crawling back, and I will make her watch as I piss on the ashes. The venom in his voice was pure, undiluted evil. The recording stopped. I sat in the dark, the headphones silent on my ears. There was no rage left. No fear. Only a profound, chilling certainty. This was no longer about revenge. It was about exorcism. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Matteo. Is everything in place for tomorrow? The website? The press list? His reply was instant. All systems go. The soul of the Apex site is primed. I've embedded a link in the press release that will go out the moment you give the signal. One click, and his world ends. I looked at the blood-red dress hanging on my closet door. The signal will be me, I typed. Walking through the door. The day of the Apex Hotel Gala dawned bright and merciless. The sun reflecting off the bay was a blinding, white-hot glare. I dressed with the meticulous care of a soldier preparing for battle. The red dress was a flag. My hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant knot. My makeup was flawless armor. I was ready. At 6 p.m., as the first guests would be arriving for cocktails, my doorbell rang. It was a different courier this time. He handed me a small, flat, express mail envelope. This one wasn't from a law firm. The return address was a P.O. box in the Cayman Islands. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. I tore it open. Inside was a single, glossy photograph. It was a picture of Matteo. He was sitting at an outdoor cafe, his face turned toward the camera, completely unaware. He was wearing the same shirt he'd had on during our last video call. The photo was taken yesterday. Paperclipped to the photograph was a typed note. Every story has an end. Some are just more final than others. Stay home. Enjoy the quiet. Or the next photo will be the last one his family ever sees of him, a friend. The world tilted. My carefully constructed calm shattered into a million pieces. They had found Matteo. The one person who had helped me, who had believed in me. My ghost in the machine, and they were threatening to kill him. This wasn't Julian's style. This was too clean, too professional. This was the Seraphim group. Ben had been right. I had poked the beast, and it had bared its fangs. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the photo. What had I done? This was no longer a game of reputation and stock prices. I had dragged an innocent man into a war he never asked for. I collapsed onto my sofa, the red dress suddenly feeling like a costume of hubris. I couldn't go. I couldn't be the reason something happened to Matteo. The plan, the blueprint, the justice. It all felt like a childish fantasy in the face of this cold, real-world threat. I had to call it off. I had to text Matteo, tell him to run, to hide, to delete everything. As I reached for my phone, it buzzed in my hand. A text from Matteo. Weird thing. I think I'm being paranoid, but I felt like I was being watched at the cafe yesterday. Moved to a new safe house. All secure. See you on the other side. Break a leg. He was safe. For now. But they knew what he looked like. They knew how to find him. The threat was real. The friend had miscalculated. The threat hadn't paralyzed me with fear. It had ignited a white-hot fury. They thought they could terrorize me into submission. They thought they could hide behind hired thugs and offshore accounts. They were wrong. I stood up, my reflection in the window a stranger, a woman forged in fire, her eyes burning with a cold righteous light. This wasn't just for me anymore. It wasn't just for Alistair Finch. It was for Matteo. It was for every single person Julian and Ben and the shadows behind them had ever threatened, cheated, or broken. I picked up the small evening clutch I had chosen for the gala. Inside, next to my phone, was a single, mini USB drive. On it was a copy of everything. The website files, Julian's arson plot. The audio recording from Evelyn. I looked at the threatening photo one last time, then I deliberately, slowly, tore it in half. The river did not fight the rock. It flowed around it. And I was the river. I walked out of my apartment, my heels clicking a steady, determined rhythm on the polished concrete floor. Downstairs, I hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. I looked out the window at the glowing, monstrous silhouette of the Apex Hotel, lit up against the twilight sky, like a temple to a false god. "The Apex Hotel," I said, my voice steady as stone. "And step on it. I have a curtain to raise." The cab pulled away from the curb, merging into the stream of traffic flowing towards the glittering bay. Towards the heart of the beast. The Apex Hotel was a cathedral of light and sound. Limousines disgorged Miami's elite women in diamonds that cost more than my father ever earned in his lifetime, men with tans as deep as their pockets. I paid the cab driver and stepped out onto the pavement. The humid night air was thick with perfume and privilege. For a moment, I was invisible, just another guest in a sea of black ties and evening gowns. Then, I started walking. I didn't walk on the red carpet. I walked beside it, a splash of defiant crimson moving against the current of black and white. I felt the eyes on me before I heard the whispers. The cameras stopped flashing for a moment, confused, then a new, more frantic volley began as they recognized me. "Is that? Elle avance. What is she doing here?" I didn't look at them. My eyes were fixed on the entrance, on the towering glass doors that reflected the chaos back at itself. Sarah from PR materialized at my side, her face a mask of frozen panic. "Alara, you came. We have your seat at the head table, right next to Julian." Her voice was a strained whisper. "Please, let's just get you inside quietly." "Quietly?" I said, not breaking my stride. "I don't think so, Sarah." I walked through the doors and into the grand atrium. The room, a space I had designed to feel like an open-air courtyard under the stars, fell into a hushed, rolling silence. The band faltered. 1,000 eyes turned to me. I saw him. Julian was at the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne, surrounded by sycophants. He was wearing his award-winning smile, but it cracked at the edges when he saw me. His eyes widened, then narrowed into slits of pure, undiluted hatred. Ben was beside him, a ghost of a man, his face the color of parchment. I stopped in the center of the dance floor, a lone island in a sea of stunned opulence. Julian broke from his group and strode toward me, his movements stiff with controlled rage. He stopped a few feet away, his voice a low, venomous hiss meant only for me. "You have 5 seconds to turn around and walk out that door before I have security throw you out." I smiled. It was a calm, easy smile. The smile of the river. "You invited me, Julian. You said you wanted to give me credit." "So," I said, my voice lifting, carrying through the silent atrium. "I'm here to claim it." I didn't give him a chance to respond. I reached into my clutch, pulled out my phone, and opened the app Matteo had designed. A single, large button glowed on the screen. Release. I looked Julian directly in the eye. I saw the confusion, the dawning horror as he realized this was not a negotiation. This was a execution. "This is for Alistair Finch," I whispered. I pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Julian's face twisted in a sneer. What was that? A tweet? And then, the screens changed. All around the atrium, the large, high-definition screens that were displaying glamorous shots of the Apex Hotel flickered. The curated images vanished, replaced by a simple, elegant website. The homepage was a side-by-side comparison. On the left, my very first, napkin sketch of the hotel, dated 2 years prior. On the right, Julian's final concept presentation. They were identical. A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Then, the site began to auto-scroll. It was a chronological story, a graphic novel of theft. My emails to Julian with attached sketches. His responses. Needs work. Not quite there. Followed by his presentations to the board with my unaltered work. The access logs to the Yale server for the Finch portfolio. The yearbook photo of the Finch fling. The silence in the room was now absolute, broken only by the sound of scrolling pixels. Then, the audio began to play. Evelyn's recording, broadcast through the atrium's state-of-the-art sound system. I want that workshop gone. A gas leak, an electrical fire. Make it look like an accident. I will make her watch as I piss on the ashes. The crowd recoiled. Gasps echoed. People took steps back from Julian as if he were contagious. He stood frozen, a statue of shame and rage, his empire collapsing around him in real time. The mask was off, and the monster was revealed for all to see. The screens went black. The audio cut out. In the profound silence, a new sound started. It was the ringing of a phone. Then another. And another. A symphony of notifications as every journalist, every blogger, every guest in the room received the press release from the curator, containing the link to the site and the full, unedited evidence packet, including the Herald's financial findings and the arson plot. Julian's phone rang. He fumbled for it, his hands shaking. He looked at the screen, and his face completely drained of color. He wasn't looking at a news alert. He was looking at a single, incoming text message. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with a terror I had never seen before. My God. Chaos erupted. The event was no longer a gala, it was a crime scene. Journalists shoved microphones toward Julian, shouting questions about fraud, about arson, about Alistair Finch. The wealthy patrons, fearing the taint of scandal, fled for the exits. Security was overwhelmed, not by violence, but by the sheer, tidal force of a story breaking in real time. I stood my ground, watching the beautiful, terrible spectacle I had orchestrated. Julian didn't answer the reporters. Ben Carter grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away, but Julian shoved him off with a snarl. You and your Finch fling, you greedy fool. The admission, caught on a dozen phone cameras, was the final nail. Ben backed away, his hands raised in surrender, before turning and disappearing into the panicked crowd, a rat fleeing a sinking ship. And then, through the main doors, came the real authority. 2 uniformed police officers, followed by 2 men in plain clothes, moved with purpose through the dissolving party. They walked straight up to Julian. Julian Croft. One of the plainclothes officers said, his voice cutting through the din. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit arson. You have the right to remain silent. The words were drowned out by the roar of the crowd. They handcuffed him. The cameras flashed, capturing the iconic image. The star architect, in his custom tuxedo, being led away in cuffs through the ruins of his own celebration, past the building he had stolen from me. As they passed me, Julian's eyes locked with mine. The hatred was gone, replaced by a hollow, bottomless shock. He had built his life on a lie, and in one night, the truth had not just exposed him. It had erased him. I felt no triumph. Only a vast, echoing emptiness. In the days that followed, the collapse was total and merciless. Croft and Associates declared bankruptcy. The Seraphim Group, exposed and under investigation, severed all ties and vanished back into the shadows. Ben Carter was arrested at the airport trying to flee to the Cayman Islands, charged with embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. The Apex Hotel, my masterpiece, stood as a monument to a scandal. Its ownership was tangled in litigation. No one wanted to stay in the Spite Hotel. I gave one interview, to the Herald journalist who had broken the financial story. I didn't talk about revenge. I talked about integrity. I talked about my father. I talked about Alistair Finch. I positioned myself not as an avenger, but as a whistleblower, a guardian of truth in a world of lies. The architecture world, after the initial shock, embraced me. Offers poured in. Not for a ghost, but for Ilara Vance, the woman who had dared to speak truth to power. A month after the gala, I found myself standing at a simple, weathered headstone in a small, quiet cemetery in Connecticut. Alistair Finch. Beloved son. Dreamer of cities. I placed a single, white stone on top of the granite. It's done, I whispered to the silence. They can't hurt you anymore. Your name is yours again. There was no answer. But the wind through the pine trees felt like a sigh of relief. On the flight back to Miami, I opened my father's journal to a fresh page. A foundation of truth can bear any weight. I landed in Miami, my phone buzzing with a new email. The subject line was an invitation. It was from the committee for the prestigious Pritzker Award. They were, in light of recent events, re-evaluating the entire Croft portfolio and its true authorship. They wanted to meet with me. They wanted to hear my story. They wanted to talk about legacy. I didn't take the meeting with the Pritzker committee. I politely declined. Accepting an award for work that was born in such pain felt like honoring a wound. Instead, I did something else. I used a significant portion of the financial settlement I eventually received from the ashes of Croft and Associates, a settlement they offered to avoid even more devastating litigation, to establish the Finch-Vance Foundation. Its mission was simple: to find, fund, and mentor young, underrepresented talent in architecture. To protect them from the Julian Crofts of the world. To give them the tools to build their own legacies, in their own names. My father's workshop became our headquarters. We ripped out the old, dusty cabinets and installed drafting tables, state-of-the-art computers, a small library. The air, once thick with the dust of the past, now hummed with the energy of the future. One afternoon, 6 months after the foundation opened its doors, I was reviewing portfolios with a brilliant, shy young woman from Haiti. Her designs were breathtaking, incorporating traditional Haitian motifs with stunning, sustainable technology. She reminded me of myself. Of the person I used to be. As we were talking, my phone buzzed. A news alert. Julian Croft pleads guilty. Sentencing next month. I put the phone face down on the table. Is everything okay? The student asked. I looked around the workshop, at the students bent over their drawings, at the light streaming in onto my father's old stone mallet, which I kept on a pedestal in the center of the room. A relic. A reminder. Yes, I said, and for the first time, I truly, deeply meant it. Everything is fine. The past was a closed book. A settled account. This, right here, was the only thing that mattered. This was creation. This was the opposite of destruction. That night I sat alone in the workshop. The city glittered in the distance, a tapestry of light and ambition. I thought about the river and the rock. The river had won, not by smashing the rock, but by enduring, by flowing, by finding a new path. Revenge hadn't made me whole. Justice had provided a reckoning, but it was this act of building something new from the broken pieces that had finally brought me peace. The moral of the story wasn't that revenge is sweet. It's that stealing another person's soul, their work, their dignity, is a poison that eventually destroys the thief. And the antidote isn't more poison. The antidote is to reclaim your own name, and then use it to build a shelter for someone else. I picked up a pencil and a fresh sheet of paper. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't sketching for a client. I wasn't designing for revenge. I was drawing for me. The lines were fluid, confident. A structure began to emerge from the blank page. It was strong. It was beautiful. It was entirely my own. And as I drew, I realized the most important twist of all. The letter I had left on Julian's desk, the one that started this whole war, it wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. They say living well is the best revenge. I don't think that's quite right. I think creating is the best revenge. Creating a new life from the ashes of the old one. Creating a sanctuary where others can find their voice. Creating a legacy that isn't built on stolen land, but on a foundation of truth and compassion. The Finch Vance Foundation is my greatest design. It has no physical blueprints, but its structure is more sound than any building I've ever conceived. Its walls are made of courage. Its windows let in the light of opportunity. And its soul is the combined spirit of a stonemason who believed in beauty, and a forgotten dreamer who never got to see his cities built. Julian Croft is in prison. Ben Carter cut a deal and is serving his time in a minimum security facility. I don't think about them often. They are echoes in a hallway I no longer walk down. Sometimes, at night, I walk through the Foundation's workshop. I run my hand over the drafting tables, I straighten a book on a shelf. I can feel them here with me, my father, Alistair Finch. They are not ghosts. They are mentors. They are muses. The world called what I did revenge. A takedown. A viral story of karma. But that's not how I see it. I see it as a restoration. A reclamation. Have you ever had a part of yourself stolen? Your confidence, your joy, your sense of justice? What did you do to get it back? Or, what are you going to do? Sometimes, the quietest step forward is the most powerful act of war. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding the courage to reclaim your own name. The media eventually moved on. They found new scandals, new villains. But the work here continues. The students come and go, carrying their dreams out into the world, their names firmly attached to their creations. And me? I still design. But now, the name on the door is mine. The soul in the buildings is mine. My father was right. A great building does have a soul. But so does a person. And after a long, dark season, I finally found mine again. It wasn't in the wreckage of Julian Croft's empire. It was here. In the quiet. In the light. In the simple, profound act of drawing a new line on a blank page, and knowing, with every fiber of my being, that it belongs to me.